If you don't see a future with me, I can't make you. The Wedding Banquet was written and directed by Andrew Ong and also written by James Shamus, who's done a lot of films such as Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, Hook, Lust, Caution, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and The King's Daughter. That last one, let's just pretend that it actually doesn't exist, because if you read up on just how problematic that whole fiasco was, dear God, no wonder it sat on the shelf for so many years. But he did one other film. Actually, he's done a lot of other films, such as The Wedding Banquet, the original, in 1993, directed by Ang Lee. A film that I saw a number of years ago and actually need to revisit, because this remake, reimagining, whatever you want to call it, brings it into the modern age in Seattle, where, boy, they certainly didn't capture the spirit of Seattle all that properly, because no streets are that clean, no alleyways are that clean, and also there's no way that drivers would actually be, well, that honorable and not want to just chase you down to get through the packed and very, very, very narrow streets of Seattle. Trust me, I've been to Seattle multiple times. It is not a fun place to drive, walk, or basically exist. Nevertheless, enough about Seattle. This features Bowen Yang as Chris, and he's been in a lot of stuff. He's actually a pretty funny guy, as well as Lily Gladstone. Yes, Washington's own Lily Gladstone, who really did deserve the Oscar for Killers of Flower Moon, or of the Flower Moon, as it were. Even though I love Emma Stone, honestly, Lily was so tremendous. I'm so glad she's still getting some, big roles here, and I wish nothing but the best for her. She plays Lee, and you also have Angela, played by Kelly Marie Tran. I'm happy to see that Kelly's continuing to do roles after all the bullshit that she dealt with from the Star Wars fans. She didn't deserve any of that shit. John Boyega didn't. Daisy Ridley. Nobody deserved that shit. And I will continue to say that anytime any of those people are featured in a movie that I decide to review. And you also have Min Han Ji Chan. And this is a very LGBTQ themed romantic comedy with some serious elements, and also just about reflections of commitment and various issues that people will have as they've been in committed relationships, where they want to go, where have all the cowboys gone. Wait, no, that's a different type of reference. The whole point is it's an exploration of these two particular relationships and how they deal with their family members. There is Mei Chen, played by Joan Chen, who was also in Lust Caution, also in Dee Dee, which you guys need to check out. That is very fucking terrific. And also there is Min's grandmother, who is played by Yoon Young. I'm really very sorry if I got that wrong. I do want to say that Grandma Min, terrific, fucking terrific. I mean, I know she's got another name. I just want to say Grandma Min just sounds really, it just sounds so proper. So basically the idea is, well, the two lasses, Lee and Angela, want to have a baby. They do IVF. It doesn't take. It's very expensive. And it turns out Min is coming into a lot of money because he's done his graduate studies. And he gets an offer to go back to Korea. He doesn't want to do that because he's committed to Chris. Chris does bird watching, also has commitment issues as well. And the idea now is suddenly they are going to do a sham marriage, shall we say. It's going to be Angela and Min getting married. And that way, he will pay for the IVF. And all they gotta do is fool Min's grandmother. Which ultimately doesn't really work, and then hilarity ensues, I guess. Look, I was originally supposed to watch this in theaters. I thought it actually looked kind of cute and kind of sweet, and I liked the cast, as I just mentioned a couple minutes ago. And I was really looking forward to seeing something that might have some good, emotional punch, but also some lighthearted moments. I found this really dull. I found this really, really exceedingly dull, to be perfectly honest. I thought everybody was on fucking Quaaludes at some points. And I'm not saying we need to do slapstick, balls to the wall comedy. I'm not saying you can't have your serious moments. The serious moments don't feel earned. And even though there are a few that could hit a little bit, the thing is none of them really, again, feel earned. There's also one twist that is telegraphed almost from the very beginning, and it's like they just practically had a neon sign saying twist, twist incoming, and oh look, lo and behold, that twist happens. Those of you that have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I'm keeping it spoiler free for now for those that haven't. And I'm sorry, that twist would have caused me to just basically say, yeah, I'm fucking done. I'll just be over here. coming from somebody that has not been in a relationship for 14 plus years by choice, I should say. Nevertheless, there's talent in front of the camera, but I'm not seeing it with the writing. I mean, yes, there's some good stuff about, generational gaps and everything, how gay, children would be accepted, children, grandchildren, whatever. But again, none of it feels earned. It just all feels sanitized and pasteurized. And for an LGBTQ themed, comedy and film, this just feels so safe. And just so, I'm not saying you need to take chances. I'm not saying you shouldn't treat it like, normal, whatever, and just go through their lives and see how their everyday lives go. But just none of it feels organic. It just all feels manufactured and safe. That being said, it is on Amazon for a few bucks. I am glad I decided to wait to watch this on Amazon so I could process it a little bit instead of on the way home. That being said, getting into spoilers, 3, 2, 1, and spoilers. So, there was a thing said earlier about the early days of college where Angela and Chris ended up doing the nasty, shall we say. Well, after an IVF basically fails, and Min is threatened with the idea of going back to Korea. He doesn't want to do that. Chris doesn't accept his proposal because he's afraid he's going to disappoint him and feels that he's just not good enough for him. He also has commitment issues. There's money issues with Lee and Angela. They take Min up on his offer. The grandmother shows up very soon after, and by the way, immediately knows that this is a sham. Immediately knows it's a sham because she knows deep down that Min is gay. And she reveals later on that she ended up basically sending him away because the grandfather was very, very, very anti-gay. And you really need to love your fucking children or your grandchildren. I don't care about culture stuff. If you feel that your children are dishonoring you by essentially, being who they are, being born this way, figuring themselves out, and you have a problem with that, then you're a terrible parent, grandparent, guardian, whatever the fuck. I know that this is not really funny or organic. Angela earlier has a few doubts about, whether she could do the IVF because she doesn't feel she'd be a great mother. That's because her mother, Miss Chen, I do have to say, she's really had quite the resurgence with her career lately, and I'm very happy to see that. But her mother's very accepting of Angela's lifestyle, except it is revealed later on that for a while they didn't talk because she wasn't all that accepting to begin with. She's trying to make up for lost time, and I'll give credit for that. That's more than some parents would end up doing. I know people that, I'm not even talking about a Korean background or whatever, people that, never get to talk to their parents again because their parents are just so goddamn far set back in the weeds and stuck in the forest they can't see the trees. I did like one funny part about the grandmother saying, we need to have a wedding and your grandfather needs to see these and this stuff in the newspaper. He'll believe it. Otherwise, people will talk, and Korean people love to talk. I can say, as somebody that has worked around Korean people before, yes, they do love to talk. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not wrong. She's not wrong. So there are a few montages such as, and this is in Bowen's words, de-queering the house because they got to make sure they set it up for the grandmother, but the grandmother knows. And the grandmother basically says, we're going to set all this up, and don't worry, everything will be fine. Pay for the IVF, whatever you want to do. Because earlier, Lee loses the other IVF, and it's really expensive. She's very down. And then, basically, it's revealed the grandparents don't have all that long to live, and the grandmother kind of wants to make up for lost time. Angela doesn't end up telling Lee until way, way later. This is after she has an argument with Lee, and after Chris and men have their argument about commitment and stuff like that. Yeah, let's just say that Angela and Chris end up sleeping together. They don't show anything, but they end up sleeping together. Much like that twist in Call. Oh, wow, that twist that they telegraphed earlier. Wow, color me shocked. And now it turns out that Angela's actually pregnant. But she doesn't tell Lee for a while. Miss Chen is all about having the spotlight and everything for these wedding pictures. Because it feels like she's trying to, like, put up this front and everything, even though she's trying to make up for lost time. The grandmother sees how accepting Miss Chen is. Obviously, she takes that kind of as a little bit of influence, realizing that she needs to be a little bit better to her grandson. She's just more standoffish. I don't think she's necessarily rude. And there's a Korean, wedding setup. Very garish and loud costumes at this, I will say. And then Angela ends up throwing up during a tradition where I guess the husband carries the wife around. I don't know enough about Korean traditions at all to understand what the fuck's going on. But then it gets revealed by Angela what she did. Lee runs off, justifiably, I might add. And that would be a good reason not to talk to anybody again, because you would trust somebody and then they do that. Min's upset. Chris leaves, so now basically it's just Angela on her own. The grandmother's still there, by the way. Miss Chen shows up. They share a drink, share some laughs. And then it just kind of becomes, the Hallmark tradition of getting back together, tying up loose ends in the last, 20 or so minutes. And then the grandmother basically says that, Min, I knew that you were gay. I knew you were trouble when you walked in. No, I kid, of course. Can't accept somebody's gay. You've got a problem. And sent him away basically to protect him. And no matter what they say, you are still my grandson. Now that was a good line. That was a good line. And it would have hit a whole lot more if anything else in this film was actually earned. That was a really good scene. But Chris then basically he doesn't want to let Min down. And then they're going to do the marriage certificate thing, which, yes, you can just go to, City Hall, so to speak, and you can just get married, because we're kind of weird like that in this state. The cousin, by the way, that showed up in the very beginning of the movie and showed up, in a couple other scenes, basically says, Chris, I'm good, you focus on you. So they're going to we have Min and Angela, they're going to get married, and then suddenly the traditional dragon thing that was at this drag show that was in the beginning and a little scene a little bit later on shows back up. It is the cousin, it is Chris. Chris says, I do want to marry you. They get married. The pastor guy is very confused, or the guy reading the stuff is very confused. And the lady saying that that's basically just says, gay baby daddy, let me take your license. Let me do that. And then basically everything's okay. Everything's accepting of this, but Lee's not there. Oh, wait, suddenly Angela goes around the corner into the garden and Lee's there and everything's okay. And then babies are crying. And I hated the ending because babies need to learn to shut the fuck up, you little whining shits. I don't like children, in case you can't tell. Yeah, there were parts of this that worked, and there were parts of this that didn't work. I don't know, the pacing, the comedy not hitting, just stuff about this just didn't work for me. Great cast, though, and they certainly tried their best. So agreed, C+, by the way, C+. It's just above okay. It's not great. I mean, I've seen worse, but it ends up kind of falling flat. So agree, disagree with what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm Charles Rickland, and until we meet again, happy trails to you.